The research that we dug into then, which really, I call this the elephant in the room, was all around AML risk. So the only stats I could get my hands on was the National Crime Agents, the NCA's report, 2019 report, which lists out all the businesses, the business sectors that commit that have had AML crime. If you're going to guess a state agency, because letting agency doesn't even sit into this, the state agency accounted for 0.13% of all AML crime. Banks, regulated businesses, solicitors, regulated, and accountants account for 97.69% of all crime. So the whole elephant in the room piece was there's hardly any little crime in lettings when it relates to AML. It's actually all the banks. So it's the real elephant in the room. Banks are not allowing agents to open accounts or keep them, blaming AML. But when you break it down, all the AML crime is sitting on banks and solicitors and accountants. So yeah, the elephant in the room, as we called it. Coming to the end of the survey, we then basically said, did you increase costs, absorb costs and things? 90% of the respondents said we just basically absorbed these increased costs with either bank account fees or if they had to outsource. Some of the hidden costs, they suddenly had 10x increase in client accounting fees themselves compared to what they did have. And obviously the admin now dealing with hundreds of bank accounts or working with an outsourced provider to get their information from one system to another. We started analyzing then what could be the impact on agency. What we found was startups were giving up. So in our survey, startups who applied for an account gave up. So what's really interesting is that next recession, we say to estate agents, get sales income, get management income, get finance, get land and new homes, get support services. When the recessions come or the next pandemic, most agents actually, the management fee income allowed them to open their doors from that side. These startups and a lot of these well-established agents no longer are getting that option. There's a north-south divide. So the northern agents were being impacted massively with this £8 per month banking fee because some of their rents were £500. They were getting £50 management fee. It's a big chunk. With obviously the southern agents with some of their really high rents, it wasn't such a big impact. And then obviously the obvious outcome was agents were selling their lettings book. So they were going, if I manage 30, 40, 50 properties, just not worth it. There was a lot of sentiment towards the CMP schemes. So agents were going to the CMP schemes and saying, the bank's closing my account, they're not giving me an account, what can we do? And again, Property Mark was picked up a couple of times where their support, the only advice they could really give them is if you can't get a client account, go to our approved outsource provider. And a lot of agents were sort of feeling that this is our livelihood and our income, and the only option you're giving us or the only advice you're giving us is to give up more of our income and pay an outsource provider. So that was so interesting, the level, and we've got a lot of the quotes that are coming out in this white paper about what agents were saying about that, because it was just not what they were looking for from their CMP providers. And we've not shared this yet with, say, Property Mark. We want to obviously get their input on the white paper from what some of their members have been saying. Then there are some debates: are banks breaking the law by converting a client account to a business account? Who is actually breaking the law? Is CMP required if you've got 100 accounts? Because the legislation talks about a client account, pooled funds. When you have separate accounts, it's no longer pooled. So I think there's a really interesting question and debate that the CMP legislation and legislators need to answer. Our conclusions then really: prepare now, have plan A, B, and C. Plan A, go and open multiple client accounts. So again, this is where we come in as a Carmody. Go out there. If you're with Lloyds, go and apply with Barclays, go and apply with Carmody. Open up client accounts, because what you don't want is your client account being shut down 2 months notice, 3 months application time. Plan B is check with your banks if they do offer a client account per landlord type of thing. Plan C, talk to the outsource providers, the ones who can give you the client account, that side. So there's ourselves, Agent Pay, that's another side of what we do. The lettings partnership, Let's Pay and Pay Prop. They all can provide you accounts. Go and talk to them. Final agents' thoughts were, banks were a law unto themselves. You know, for quite a few agents complained to the financial ombudsman, who basically came back and said the banks, it's up to them, it's their choice, they abide by the same legislation, really up to them what they want to do. And the agents' really biggest concerns was the high banking charges, high outsource costs, and the actual fear of not opening an account and the impact on the business. And there were some nice comments that there was overwhelming support for the white paper in the survey. My final thoughts were really, as working through the survey, was it's taken away agents' livelihood. You know, I used to be an agent, and actually looking at this going, it really brought the fear of God into me. If I suddenly had 2 months and lost my client account, my business would be in trouble. And actually looking into it with the elephant in the room in terms of AML, the risk, is this a banking strategy to commercialize client accounting, to move us from free banking, business banking, to business banking? And then once you have 100 accounts, you're into commercial banking. You know, just looking at the figures, the ONS, Office of National Statistics, in 2017 said there were 2.2 million tenancies protected in the deposit scheme. So that's a good gauge of how many active tenancies in England alone. If you just put down £22 per account per property, that's nearly a 600 million pound industry, you know, a value of banking fees a year, excluding the 35p's payments in and out. So to me, it just feels like the bank's going, you know, there's no love for the lettings industry from a reputational standpoint, and banks and solicitors are up there as well. But actually, if they go after that sector, no one's going to really cry for agents if the banks are charging them more. And kind of conclusions we're coming to is it is a commercialization. They're commercializing. They're making money on client money by forcing agents down this route of an account. And fintech, the whole idea of open banking, could overcome this risk of AML, and fraud on accounts and things. So people like the CMP providers could use open banking to get the agents to connect their bank account to their auditing systems, and then everyone can see what's happening. So actually, from a risk perspective, using open banking could change that. And my final thought is get prepared, get plan A, open up more client accounts.
And I think I liked your ABC advice. I think the insights that you've given, and the stuff that you've gone through with the survey and what's come out of it, and the research you've done behind it with the other stats, I think it is eye-opening to see that. And I do really think that you've given some great advice to help people in that situation if they are there, because if it takes 3 months to open and you're only given 2 months, you know, there's just not enough time. And that's, you know, literally there's a month where you're like, well, what am I doing? How do we make that work? And you don't need that stress on top of running your business.
And the average, you need to do 3 applications before you get a yes. So it's not just, you might get lucky in the first one, but the average that we're coming back is how many accounts did you open, and it was how many applications did you make, and it was 3. So that's the scary bit.
But look, I'm really, really grateful for you coming on the show. I'm really, really grateful for your insights, your help, your advice, and thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Cheers.